The morning of November 11th, 2024 began like any other at Birmingham Airport, the second busiest airport in the United Kingdom. It processes over 30 million passengers annually, serving as a vital gateway between Britain and the world. But beneath the routine bustle of travelers collecting luggage and heading home, a darker reality was about to be exposed, one that would reveal how organized crime had infiltrated the very heart of Britain's aviation infrastructure. Birmingham Airport sits strategically in the Midlands, perfectly positioned to serve not just the local population, but as a distribution hub for narcotics flowing into communities across England, Scotland, and Wales. For years, it had been quietly establishing itself as one of Europe's most significant entry points for cocaine trafficking. A fact that would become devastatingly clear as investigators peeled back the layers of what they would later describe as one of the most sophisticated family-run drug operations in British criminal history. The story we're about to uncover spans decades of criminal evolution, from the early days of small-time dealers making careless mistakes to the emergence of multi-generational crime families who turned drug trafficking into a precise, almost corporate operation. It's a story that exposes not just individual criminality, but the systematic vulnerabilities in our border controls, the devastating impact of the global cocaine trade on British communities, and the lengths to which some families will go in pursuit of wealth, even if it means destroying the lives of their own children. What makes this investigation particularly chilling is how it reveals the normalization of serious, organized crime within seemingly ordinary families. These weren't hardened career criminals operating from the shadows. They were mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, people who attended school meetings and family gatherings, who lived in suburban homes and drove ordinary cars. Yet behind this facade of respectability, they were orchestrating operations that pumped millions of pounds worth of Class A drugs onto British streets. The National Crime Agency estimates that the cocaine trade alone costs the UK economy over £2 billion annually through healthcare, criminal justice, and social services. But the human cost is immeasurable: families torn apart by addiction, communities blighted by drug-related violence, and young people whose futures are destroyed before they've truly begun. The cases we're examining today offer a window into how this destruction operates, how it spreads, and why it has proven so difficult to stop. Birmingham Airport's position as a major international hub made it an attractive target for trafficking networks, with hundreds of flights arriving daily from destinations across Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. It presented both opportunities and challenges for criminal organizations. The sheer volume of passenger traffic created natural cover for smuggling operations, while the airport's connections to major cities like London, Manchester, and Liverpool provided easy distribution routes to Britain's largest drug markets. By the early 2020s, intelligence reports were painting a concerning picture. Seizures of cocaine at Birmingham Airport had increased by over 400% since 2018, with purity levels consistently higher than the national average. This was not just an increase in detection, it was clear evidence that Birmingham had become a preferred entry point for some of the most sophisticated trafficking networks operating between South America and Europe. The airport's geography played a crucial role in this development. Unlike Heathrow or Gatwick, which handle enormous volumes but maintain intense security focus, Birmingham offered a middle ground: significant international traffic, but with security resources stretched across multiple priorities. Its position in the Midlands meant that drugs arriving there could be distributed to major population centers within hours, making it an ideal logistics hub for criminal organizations thinking strategically about market penetration. What investigators didn't fully understand until 2024 was how deeply certain criminal networks had studied and exploited these advantages. The cases we're about to examine reveal trafficking operations that had been refined over years, methods that had been tested and perfected, and criminal hierarchies that operated with business-like efficiency. These weren't opportunistic crimes. They were the result of careful planning, international coordination, and a level of criminal sophistication that challenged every assumption about how drug trafficking worked in modern Britain. The first case in our investigation centers on a woman who would challenge every stereotype about who becomes involved in serious organized crime. Farzana Cowzer appeared to be the epitome of respectability, a 54-year-old mother and grandmother living quietly in Bradford, West Yorkshire. To her neighbors, she was simply another middle-aged woman managing family responsibilities. perhaps no different from thousands of others in similar suburban communities across Britain. Bradford itself provides important context for understanding how Cowzer's operation developed. The city has a complex relationship with both legitimate international business and criminal enterprises. Its large Pakistani and Bangladeshi communities maintain strong cultural and economic ties to South Asia, creating natural networks that span continents. While the vast majority of these connections are entirely legal and beneficial, they also create opportunities for criminal exploitation. The city has struggled with drug-related crime for decades. Bradford consistently ranks among English cities with the highest rates of drug-related offenses, and local police forces have repeatedly identified cocaine trafficking as a primary concern. The combination of established international connections, economic deprivation in certain areas, and the strategic location between major cities like Manchester and Leeds has made Bradford fertile ground for criminal networks seeking to establish distribution hubs. Cowzer understood these dynamics intimately. She had grown up in Bradford, raised her family there, and maintained extensive connections within both the legitimate Pakistani business community and the underground networks that operated parallel to it. This dual existence, respectable community member by day, criminal mastermind by night, would prove to be her greatest strength and ultimately her downfall. Intelligence reports later revealed that Cowzer had been operating for at least 5 years before her arrest, gradually building relationships and testing methods while maintaining her facade of ordinary family life. She attended parents' evenings at her children's schools, participated in community events, and maintained friendships that spanned decades. Yet simultaneously, she was developing contacts in Pakistan and Mexico, learning about cocaine pricing and purity, and studying airport security procedures with the dedication of a graduate student. Her criminal education appears to have been methodical and patient, rather than rushing into large-scale operations. She spent years understanding how international drug networks operated, where vulnerabilities existed, and how successful trafficking organizations managed risk. She studied court cases, read about failed operations, and learned from the mistakes of others. By the time she was ready to launch her own network, she had developed what investigators would later describe as an encyclopedic understanding of drug trafficking methodology. The sophistication of her approach extended to recruitment and operational security. Unlike many criminal organizations that rely on external associates who might become informants or security risks, Cowzer made the calculated decision to build her network around family members. This strategy offered significant advantages. Family loyalty was assumed to be stronger than business relationships. Communication could happen naturally within domestic settings, and the risk of betrayal was theoretically minimized. However, this approach also revealed something deeply disturbing about Cowzer's character. She was willing to sacrifice her children's futures, their safety, and their freedom in pursuit of criminal profits. Her decision to recruit family members wasn't just about operational security. It was an act of profound selfishness that would ultimately destroy multiple young lives. Her eldest son, Jund Shafak, was 33 when the operation was uncovered. Old enough to make his own decisions, but still deeply influenced by maternal authority. Jund had grown up watching his mother's transformation from ordinary housewife to criminal entrepreneur, and his gradual recruitment into the conspiracy appears to have been a process of normalization rather than a single moment of decision. Muhammad Amir Shafak, 28, represented a different type of recruitment. He had been raised in an environment where his mother's criminal activities were presented as necessary for family prosperity. By the time he was old enough to understand the true nature of what was happening, criminal behavior had become normalized within the family structure. His role as a courier required him to travel internationally, carry large sums of money, and interact with dangerous criminal contacts, all while maintaining the pretense of being an ordinary young man from Bradford. The recruitment of Muhammad, just 22 years old, demonstrates the tragic generational impact of family-based criminal operations. Was barely out of his teenage years when he became actively involved in international drug trafficking. His youth made him an ideal courier, less likely to attract suspicion, more likely to be treated leniently if caught, and more easily manipulated by older family members who framed criminal activity as family loyalty. Most disturbing of all was the involvement of Hamza Shafak, who was only 17 when the offenses took place. Hamza was legally a child when he became involved in his mother's criminal network, making him both a perpetrator and a victim of the conspiracy. His recruitment represents perhaps the starkest illustration of how Cowzer prioritized criminal profits over family welfare. She was literally prepared to destroy her youngest son's future for financial gain. The involvement of Safana Juzisinwebe and daughter-in-law, Sarah Hussein, 27, shows how the criminal infection spread beyond the immediate bloodline. Cowzer's influence extended to encompassing virtually every young adult in her extended family, creating a closed system where criminal behavior became the family norm rather than the exception. The recruitment of Khaled Abdul Kawai, 36, a family friend rather than blood relative, demonstrates how successful criminal networks expand beyond family boundaries while maintaining tight operational security. Kawai's willingness to join the conspiracy suggests either the compelling nature of the financial incentives or the effectiveness of Cowzer's recruitment techniques, possibly both. Understanding the psychology behind Cowzer's criminal evolution requires examining the broader social and economic context within which she operated. Bradford, like many post-industrial British cities, has experienced significant economic challenges over the past 3 decades. Traditional manufacturing industries have declined. Unemployment rates have remained stubbornly high in certain communities, and legitimate opportunities for economic advancement have become increasingly scarce. For individuals like Cowzer, who possessed entrepreneurial instincts but limited access to legitimate business opportunities, criminal enterprises could appear attractive. The global cocaine trade offers enormous profit margins, relatively low barriers to entry for those with the right connections, and the possibility of generating wealth that would be impossible through conventional employment. However, what distinguishes Cowzer from other criminals motivated primarily by economic necessity is the systematic and long-term nature of her planning. This was not a desperate response to immediate financial pressure. It was a calculated business decision made by someone who had carefully evaluated the risks and potential rewards of large-scale drug trafficking. Her success in maintaining operational security for several years suggests someone with natural criminal intelligence and strong organizational capabilities. She understood the importance of compartmentalization, ensuring that different family members knew only what they needed to know about specific operations. She maintained legitimate business interests and social connections that provided cover for her criminal activities. Most importantly, she developed international connections that allowed her to access high-quality cocaine supplies while maintaining distance from the most dangerous aspects of the drug trade. The international dimension of Cowzer's operation reveals how modern drug trafficking has evolved into a genuinely global enterprise. Her connections in Pakistan provided crucial links to criminal networks operating across South Asia, while her relationships with suppliers in Mexico gave her access to some of the highest quality cocaine available on international markets. The figure referred to as Uncle in Pakistan appears to have played a crucial coordinating role, helping to arrange logistics, provide financial services, and maintain communication between different elements of the network. This type of international coordination requires sophisticated communication systems, reliable money transfer mechanisms, and extensive knowledge of international travel patterns and border security procedures. Her Mexican connections were equally sophisticated. The cocaine arriving at Birmingham Airport had simply been purchased from random dealers. It was part of a carefully coordinated supply chain that extended from coca cultivation in Colombia through processing facilities in various South American countries to distribution networks operating across Europe. The quality and consistency of the cocaine seized during the investigation suggests that Cowzer had developed relationships with suppliers who could guarantee both purity and reliable delivery. This type of relationship typically takes years to establish and requires substantial financial investment. Upfront further evidence of the long-term nature of her criminal planning. The method that Cowzer's network used to smuggle cocaine through Birmingham Airport represents perhaps the most ingenious aspect of their entire operation. Rather than relying on traditional concealment techniques or corrupting airport personnel, they developed a system that exploited the natural chaos and complexity of a major international airport's baggage handling systems. The strategy began with what appeared to be innocent short-haul trips to European destinations like Dublin and Amsterdam. These journeys served multiple purposes. They established legitimate travel patterns that wouldn't attract attention. They provided cover for being at the airport when long-haul flights arrived, and they created plausible explanations for why family members were regularly visiting Birmingham Airport. The timing element was crucial to the entire operation. Long-haul flights from Cancun, Mexico typically arrived at Birmingham Airport during specific windows, determined by flight schedules and international routing patterns. Cowzer's team had studied these patterns carefully, identifying the optimal times when their short-haul return flights would coincide with the arrival of cocaine shipments from Mexico. The baggage collection process itself was where the criminal innovation really showed. Modern airports process enormous volumes of luggage daily, with sophisticated automated systems designed to match bags to passengers efficiently. However, these systems also create opportunities for exploitation by individuals who understand how they work. When passengers from multiple flights converge on baggage collection areas, the normal security assumption is that people will only collect luggage that belongs to them. This assumption is reinforced by boarding pass checks and general surveillance, but that's not foolproof, particularly when dealing with individuals who have legitimate reasons to be in the area and who behave naturally while collecting bags. Cowzer's team had practiced this behavior over multiple trips, learning how to move confidently through baggage areas, how to identify the correct luggage quickly, and how to avoid attracting attention from security personnel or other passengers. Their ability to maintain composure during these operations was crucial. Any signs of nervousness or unusual behavior would have triggered additional scrutiny. The cocaine itself was packaged specifically for this type of operation, rather than being hidden in false compartments or disguised as other products. It was packed in standard luggage in ways that would survive normal baggage handling while remaining easy to identify and collect quickly. This approach required careful coordination with criminal contacts in Mexico, who understood the specific requirements of the Birmingham Airport operation. The logistics of getting cocaine-loaded luggage onto flights in Cancun without corresponding passengers required corruption within the Mexican aviation system. This type of corruption typically involves multiple individual skin staff who process bags without proper documentation, security personnel who allow suspicious luggage to pass through screening, and baggage handlers who ensure that specific bags are loaded onto correct flights. Establishing and maintaining these corrupt relationships requires ongoing financial investment and careful relationship management. The criminal network had to ensure that their Mexican contacts remained reliable, discreet, and available when needed, while also managing the inherent risks of working with individuals who were already involved in serious criminal activity. The success of this method over multiple smuggling runs between August and November 2024 demonstrates both the sophistication of the planning and the effectiveness of the execution. Each successful operation reinforced the team's confidence and provided financial resources for expanding the network further. However, the repetitive nature of their success also created the pattern recognition that would ultimately lead to their downfall. Intelligence analysts studying unusual travel patterns and baggage collection behaviors began to identify connections between seemingly unrelated individuals who were making similar trips at similar times. The investigation that would ultimately expose Cowzer's network had been developing for months before the November 11th arrests. Multiple law enforcement agencies had been quietly sharing intelligence about suspicious travel patterns, unusual financial transactions, and potential trafficking indicators. The National Crime Agency, working with Border Force, West Midlands Police, and international partners, had begun mapping what they suspected was a sophisticated smuggling operation, rather than moving immediately to make arrests. They chose to conduct extensive surveillance to understand the full scope of the network and gather evidence that would support successful prosecutions. This patient approach to building criminal cases reflects lessons learned from previous trafficking investigations. Early intervention might disrupt individual smuggling attempts, but often fails to capture the full criminal hierarchy or gather sufficient evidence for lengthy prison sentences. By waiting and watching, investigators hope to dismantle the entire operation while also gathering intelligence about international connections that could inform future cases. The surveillance operation required coordination between multiple agencies and sophisticated technical resources. CCTV systems throughout Birmingham Airport were monitored continuously, with analysts looking for individuals whose behavior matched suspected trafficking patterns. Financial intelligence units tracked unusual money transfers and cash transactions that might indicate drug trafficking profits. Communications intercepts provided insights into how the network coordinated operations and managed relationships with international contacts. Perhaps most importantly, investigators had begun developing human intelligence sources within communities where trafficking networks typically operated. This type of intelligence gathering is extremely sensitive and potentially dangerous, requiring careful management to protect sources while gathering actionable information about criminal activities. By early November 2024, the investigative team was confident that they understood the basic structure and methodology of Cowzer's network. They had identified key players, mapped travel patterns, and established the probable timing of future smuggling attempts. The decision to intervene on November 11th was based on intelligence, suggesting that this would be one of the largest cocaine shipments the network had attempted to smuggle. The arrest operation itself required careful choreography to ensure both officers' safety and evidence preservation. Teams were positioned throughout Birmingham Airport, with backup units standing by in case suspects attempted to flee or resist arrest. The timing had to be precise too early, and the suspects might escape too late, and the cocaine could disappear into the distribution network. As the long-haul flight from Cancun touched down at Birmingham Airport that Tuesday morning, members of Cowzer's family were already in position. They had arrived on their scheduled return flights from Dublin and Amsterdam, passing through customs and security with the casual confidence that had served them well in previous operations. CCTV footage later released by the National Crime Agency shows them moving through the terminal with remarkable composure. There are no obvious signs of nervousness, no furtive glances, or suspicious behavior. They appeared to be exactly what they were pretending to be: ordinary travelers heading home after short trips abroad. The baggage collection area was busy with passengers from multiple flights, creating the natural chaos that the criminal network relied upon for cover. As bags began appearing on the carousel serving the Cancun flight, Cowzer's team moved into position with practiced efficiency. 6 specific suitcases had been loaded onto the flight in Mexico, each one containing compressed blocks of high-purity cocaine. These bags had been marked or identified in ways that allowed the criminal team to recognize them quickly among the dozens of other pieces of luggage circulating on the carousel. The collection process itself took only minutes, working in pairs to avoid drawing attention. Family members lifted the heavy suitcases off the carousel and loaded them onto trolleys. To casual observers, they appeared to be ordinary passengers collecting their belongings after long journeys. But this time, every movement was being recorded by surveillance teams positioned throughout the terminal. The arrest teams waited until the suspects had committed themselves fully to the criminal act, electing bags that clearly did unbelong to them and preparing to leave the airport with stolen luggage containing Class A drugs. As the group pushed their trolleys toward the terminal exits, they must have felt the familiar rush of another successful operation. The cocaine was secured. The airport security had been navigated successfully, and all that remained was the short journey to vehicles waiting in the car park. They had no idea that their criminal careers were about to end in the most public and devastating way possible. The arrest operation unfolded with military precision in the car park outside Birmingham Airport. As Cowzer's team began loading the 6 cocaine-filled suitcases into waiting vehicles, National Crime Agency teams moved in from multiple directions, surrounding the suspects before they had any opportunity to flee or destroy evidence. The timing was crucial. The arrests needed to happen after the suspects had demonstrated clear criminal intent by collecting luggage that did unbelong to them. But before they could disappear into the road network around Birmingham, the NCA teams had been positioned strategically to ensure that every possible escape route was covered. CCTV footage from the car park shows the moment when the carefully orchestrated criminal operation collapsed into chaos and confusion. Suspects who had maintained perfect composure while navigating airport security suddenly found themselves surrounded by armed officers, with no possibility of escape or denial. The 6 suitcases were secured immediately, preventing any attempt to destroy or dispose of the evidence. Initial field tests confirmed the presence of cocaine, but the full scale of the seizure would not become clear until forensic analysis was completed in laboratory conditions. Transportation of the suspects to custody facilities required careful coordination to maintain both security and the integrity of the evidence. Each individual was processed separately to prevent communication that might allow them to coordinate their stories or destroy additional evidence. The immediate aftermath of the arrests saw a massive mobilization of investigative resources. Search warrants were executed at addresses across Bradford and other locations connected to the criminal network. Digital forensics teams began analyzing mobile phones and other electronic devices that might contain evidence of the conspiracy. Financial investigators started tracing money transfers and cash transactions that could reveal the scope of the criminal profits. The forensic analysis of the seized cocaine provided shocking insights into the scale of the operation. The 6 suitcases contained a total of 180 kilograms of compressed cocaine blocks, representing one of the largest single seizures at Birmingham Airport in recent years. Laboratory testing revealed that the cocaine was of exceptionally high purity, ranging from 85% to 92% pure. This level of purity is rarely seen in street-level drug seizures, and indicated that the network had access to cocaine very close to its original source in South America. The wholesale value of the seizure was estimated at approximately £5 million, representing the price that criminal organizations would pay for cocaine of this quality and quantity. However, once broken down into smaller quantities and diluted to street-level purity, the cocaine could have generated retail sales worth more than £14.4 million. These figures represent more than just financial losses for the criminal network. They indicate the enormous profits available in cocaine trafficking and help explain why individuals like Cowzer were willing to risk their freedom and their families' futures for involvement in such operations. The economic impact analysis conducted by the NCA estimated that preventing this single shipment from reaching British streets avoided costs to the healthcare system, criminal justice system, and social services that could have exceeded £20 million over the following 5 years. But the human cost prevented by this seizure is impossible to calculate precisely. High-purity cocaine of this type typically enters the market through established distribution networks that supply dealers operating in communities across Britain. The addiction, violence, and social destruction that would have followed from 180 kilograms of pure cocaine reaching the street level represents thousands of individual tragedies that were prevented by the successful investigation. The international implications of the seizure were equally significant. The sophistication of the operation and the quality of the cocaine indicated connections to some of the most advanced criminal networks operating between South America and Europe. Intelligence gathered during the investigation was shared with law enforcement agencies in Mexico, Pakistan, Colombia, and other countries where the network appeared to have connections. This intelligence sharing is crucial for disrupting international trafficking networks that operate across multiple jurisdictions. Criminal organizations exploit differences in legal systems, enforcement capabilities, and international cooperation to maintain their operations. Only through coordinated international responses can law enforcement agencies effectively combat trafficking networks that span continents. The investigation also provided valuable insights into airport security vulnerabilities that could be exploited by other criminal networks. The methodology used by Cowzer's team was analyzed extensively to understand how similar operations might be prevented in the future. Recommendations emerging from the investigation included enhanced surveillance of baggage collection areas, improved tracking of unaccompanied luggage, and better intelligence sharing between airports handling flights from high-risk source countries. However, the fundamental challenge remains that criminal networks are constantly evolving their methods in response to law enforcement countermeasures. The success of Cowzer's operation over multiple smuggling runs demonstrates that even sophisticated security systems can be circumvented by criminals who are patient, intelligent, and well-resourced. The arrest of Cowzer's network marked the beginning of a complex legal process that would ultimately see the entire criminal hierarchy face justice in British courts. However, their story was just one part of a broader pattern of criminal exploitation of Birmingham Airport that had been developing over many years. The investigation files contained evidence of other trafficking networks that had used similar methods, suggesting that the airport had become a preferred entry point for multiple criminal organizations. The challenge for law enforcement agencies was to understand not just individual criminal operations, but the systematic vulnerabilities that made Birmingham Airport attractive to international trafficking networks. This broader understanding would prove crucial as investigators examined other cases that had unfolded at the same airport, each one revealing different aspects of how modern drug trafficking operations exploit weaknesses in border security and airport management. The second case in our investigation takes us back to February 2016, revealing how even the most experienced criminals can be undone by seemingly minor mistakes. This case would ultimately expose one of Birmingham's most significant drug dealers, but it began with an error so basic that it challenged every assumption about criminal competence and operational security. Majid Hussein appeared to be a seasoned criminal operator, someone who had successfully managed drug distribution networks for years while avoiding detection. At 45 years old, he had built what investigators would later describe as a sophisticated drug empire that generated hundreds of thousands of pounds in annual profits. Hussein's criminal career had developed gradually over the previous decade, beginning with small-scale drug dealing in Birmingham Airport area, and evolving into a major distribution operation that supplied dealers across the West Midlands. His success had been built on careful risk management, reliable suppliers, and a reputation for high-quality products that attracted customers from across the region. The Saltley area where Hussein operated provides important context for understanding how his criminal network developed. This part of Birmingham has struggled with economic deprivation for decades, creating conditions where illegal economic activities can flourish alongside legitimate businesses. The area's diverse population includes established communities with connections to Pakistan, Bangladesh, and other South Asian countries, creating natural networks that can be exploited for both legitimate and criminal purposes. Hussein had grown up in this environment, understanding both the opportunities and risks that it presented for criminal enterprises. By 2016, Hussein had established himself as what police intelligence analysts classify as a middle-tier drug dealer, someone who operates between street-level dealers and major importers, buying in substantial quantities and distributing to smaller operators who handle retail sales. This position in the criminal hierarchy typically requires significant capital investment, reliable suppliers, and sophisticated operational security. Hussein success in maintaining this position for several years suggests someone with natural criminal intelligence and strong organizational capabilities. He had developed relationships with suppliers who could provide consistent quantities of high-quality cocaine and heroin. He had established a network of subordinate dealers who could distribute his products across Birmingham and surrounding areas. Most importantly, he had managed to avoid the attention of law enforcement agencies that were actively targeting drug dealers in his area. His decision to travel to Pakistan in February 2016 appears to have been connected to strengthening his supply chain connections. Intelligence reports suggest that he was meeting with contacts who could provide access to heroin being produced in Afghanistan and smuggled through Pakistan as tribal areas. This type of international travel is common among middle-tier drug dealers who need to maintain relationships with suppliers and explore new opportunities for expanding their operations. However, it also creates risks. International travel increases visibility to law enforcement agencies and creates opportunities for mistakes that might not occur during routine domestic operations. Hussein's preparation for the journey appears to have been thorough in most respects. He had arranged legitimate business cover for the trip, established communication protocols with his UK-based associates, and planned his return journey to minimize customs scrutiny. However, his decision to carry heroin in his hand luggage represents such a fundamental breach of basic criminal security that it continues to puzzle investigators years later. Experienced drug dealers typically understand that airports represent the highest risk environment for carrying illegal substances, with multiple layers of security and detection equipment specifically designed to identify drugs and other contraband. The heroin that Hussein was carrying wasn't even particularly valuable, street value of perhaps £200 to £300, a trivial amount compared to the hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of drugs that investigators would later discover at his home address. The risk-reward calculation made no rational sense from a criminal perspective. Several theories have been proposed to explain this inexplicable lapse in judgment. Some investigators suggest that Hussein had become overconfident after years of successful operations, leading him to underestimate airport security capabilities. Others believe that he may have been carrying the heroin for personal use during the flight, indicating a level of drug addiction that compromised his decision-making abilities. A third possibility is that Hussein had been supplied with the heroin by his Pakistani contacts as a sample of their products, and he felt obligated to transport it personally rather than risk losing face by refusing. This type of cultural consideration sometimes influences criminal decision-making in ways that seem irrational from a purely business perspective. Whatever the explanation, Hussein's decision to carry heroin in his hand luggage created the vulnerability that would ultimately destroy his entire criminal empire. Airport security procedures that he could have navigated successfully became the mechanism for his downfall. The discovery of the heroin during routine hand luggage screening at Birmingham Airport immediately escalated what should have been a routine departure into a major criminal investigation. Security staff who found the drugs followed established protocols, detaining Hussein and alerting both airport police and relevant intelligence agencies. The interrogation process that followed Hussein's detention provides insights into how experienced criminals respond when their operational security fails catastrophically. Initial interviews reveal someone who was clearly shocked by his arrest, but who attempted to minimize the significance of the heroin discovery. Hussein's first response was to claim that the heroin belonged to someone else and had been placed in his luggage without his knowledge. This defense is commonly attempted by drug smugglers, but rarely successful when drugs are found in carry-on luggage that has been under the passenger's direct control. When this explanation failed to convince investigators, Hussein shifted to claiming that the heroin was for personal use, hoping to reduce the charges he might face. However, the quantity and packaging of the heroin suggested commercial rather than personal use, undermining this defense. Throughout the interrogation process, Hussein maintained the calm demeanor that had served him well during years of criminal activity. He answered questions carefully, avoided providing information about his criminal associates, and attempted to portray himself as a minor player who had made a single mistake. However, investigators had already begun the process that would expose the true scale of his operations. The discovery of heroin at the airport provided legal justification for searching Hussein's home address and examining his financial records, opening the door to a comprehensive investigation of his criminal empire. The search warrant executed at Hussein's home on Nansen Road in Saltley marked the beginning of discoveries that would shock even experienced drug investigators. What they found revealed not just a drug dealer, but someone who had been operating at a level of criminal sophistication that placed him among Birmingham's most significant trafficking figures. The search began in Hussein's bedroom, where investigators expected to find evidence of drug-related activity, but were unprepared for the scale of what they discovered. Hidden under his bed was a large suitcase that initially appeared to contain clothing and personal items. However, closer examination revealed that the suitcase had been carefully modified to create concealed compartments containing massive quantities of Class A drugs. The cocaine discovery was even more significant. 4 kilograms of high-purity cocaine, carefully wrapped and prepared for distribution, represented one of the largest single seizures from a residential property in Birmingham's history. The quality of the cocaine suggested direct connections to major importers, indicating that Hussein was operating at a much higher level in the criminal hierarchy than his initial arrest had suggested. The packaging and storage of the drugs revealed operational sophistication that reinforced this assessment, rather than being stored haphazardly. Everything was carefully organized and labeled in ways that suggested systematic distribution operations. Different purity levels were clearly marked. Customer orders appeared to have been prepared in advance, and the entire operation had the hallmarks of a successful criminal business. But drugs were only part of the picture that emerged from Hussein's bedroom. The weapons cache that investigators discovered transformed their understanding of who they were dealing with and the level of danger that his criminal activities represented to the wider community. The semi-automatic handgun found in Hussein's possession was fully functional and loaded with live ammunition. Ballistics testing later revealed that the weapon had not been used in any recorded shooting incidents, but its presence indicated Hussein's willingness to use violence if necessary to protect his criminal interests. The discovery of 27 rounds of live ammunition suggested that Hussein was prepared for sustained conflict if his operations were threatened by rivals or law enforcement. This level of armament goes far beyond what would be necessary for personal protection and indicates someone who viewed violence as a legitimate business tool. Perhaps most concerning was the stun gun disguised as a mobile phone. This type of concealed weapon suggests premeditation and planning for situations where Hussein might need to ink victims or rivals without attracting immediate attention. The device had been professionally modified and was in perfect working condition. The air pistol, while less deadly than the other weapons, completed a picture of someone who had access to multiple options for threatening or harming others. For investigators, this weapons cache indicated that Hussein's drug-dealing activities were supported by a willingness to use serious violence if necessary. The 300,000 pounds in cash discovered throughout Hussein's property provided the final piece of evidence needed to understand the true scale of his criminal operations. This wasn't money saved from legitimate employment, it was the accumulated profits from years of successful drug trafficking. The cash had been hidden in multiple locations throughout the house, suggesting both the systematic nature of Hussein's money laundering activities and his awareness of the need to distribute risk. Some money was found in traditional hiding places like false floors and wall cavities, while other caches were concealed in household items that would be unlikely to attract attention during casual searches. The denomination and condition of the banknotes provided additional intelligence about Hussein's operations. Large quantities of smaller denomination notes suggested extensive retail drug sales, while bundles of larger notes indicated wholesale transactions with other criminal organizations. Forensic analysis of the cash revealed traces of cocaine and heroin, providing definitive proof that the money had been generated through drug trafficking activities. This type of scientific evidence is crucial for successful prosecutions, as it establishes clear links between suspects and criminal activities even when direct observation evidence might be limited. The total value of drugs, weapons, and cash seized from Hussein's property exceeds £650,000, representing one of the most significant single-address seizures in West Midlands police history. However, investigators believed that this represented only a portion of Hussein's total criminal assets, with additional money and property likely hidden elsewhere or transferred to associates. Financial intelligence analysis suggested that Hussein's criminal enterprise had been generating annual profits in excess of £500,000, placing him among the most successful drug dealers operating in the Birmingham area. This level of criminal success required connections to major suppliers, sophisticated money laundering capabilities, and operational security measures that had protected him from detection for several years. The investigation revealed that Hussein had been reinvesting criminal profits into expanding his operations, purchasing increasingly large quantities of drugs, and developing relationships with suppliers who could provide access to higher quality products. This reinvestment strategy is characteristic of successful criminal entrepreneurs who viewed drug trafficking as a business rather than simply a means of generating immediate income. However, Hussein's success had also created vulnerabilities that would prove crucial to his eventual downfall. The scale of his operations required increasing numbers of people to know about his activities, expanding the risk that information about his criminal empire might reach law enforcement agencies. His decision to travel internationally to strengthen supply chain relationships, while potentially beneficial for his criminal operations, had created the opportunity for the mistake that would ultimately destroy everything he had built. The court proceedings that followed. Hussein's arrest provided a comprehensive examination of how modern drug trafficking operations function and the devastating impact they have on communities across Britain. When the case came before Birmingham Crown Court in August 2016, prosecutors presented evidence that painted a detailed picture of criminal sophistication and community harm. The prosecution case, led by senior Crown Prosecution Service lawyers with extensive experience in major drug trafficking cases, methodically demonstrated the connections between Hussein's airport arrest and the criminal empire discovered at his home address. Expert witnesses explained how the various elements of the case fit together to reveal a criminal operation that had been causing immeasurable damage to Birmingham communities for years. The forensic evidence was particularly compelling. Laboratory analysis had confirmed that the heroin found in Hussein's hand luggage matched samples found at his home address, establishing a clear connection between the airport incident and the larger criminal enterprise. Similarly, fingerprint and DNA evidence linked Hussein directly to the packaging and storage of the drugs discovered during the property search. Financial experts testified about the money laundering implications of the £300,000 cash seizure, explaining to the jury how such large amounts of cash could only realistically have been generated through sustained criminal activity. The prosecution demonstrated that Hussein's legitimate income, primarily from occasional construction work, could not possibly account for the wealth that had been discovered. The weapons evidence proved particularly damaging to any potential defense arguments. Ballistics experts explained the lethal capabilities of the firearms found in Hussein's possession, while the stun gun disguised as a mobile phone was presented as clear evidence of premeditated criminal planning. Throughout the trial, Hussein maintained his innocence on the most serious charges, claiming that, while he admitted to possessing the heroin found at the airport, he had been unaware of the larger quantities of drugs found at his home. The prosecution also presented evidence about the broader impact of Hussein's criminal activities on Birmingham communities. Local police officers testified about increases in drug-related crime in areas where Hussein was known to operate, while healthcare professionals explained the costs to the NHS of treating addiction and overdoses related to the types of drugs that Hussein had been distributing. Community impact statements from residents of Saltley and surrounding areas provided powerful testimony about how drug-dealing activities had affected their daily lives, their children's safety, and their confidence in local law enforcement's ability to protect them from criminal exploitation. Judge Patrick Thomas, QC's sentencing remarks provided a comprehensive assessment of Hussein's criminal culpability and the broader implications of his case for drug trafficking enforcement in the United Kingdom. The judge noted that Hussein's criminal enterprise represented exactly the type of sophisticated, well-resourced trafficking operation that was driving the epidemic of cocaine and heroin addiction affecting communities across Britain. The 12-year prison sentence reflected both the severity of Hussein's crimes and the need to deter others who might be considering similar criminal activities. However, Judge Thomas was careful to explain that imprisonment alone was insufficient to address the broader problems that Hussein's case had revealed. The proceeds of crime proceedings that followed Hussein's conviction represented an equally important aspect of the criminal justice response to his case. These proceedings, conducted under the Proceeds of Crime Act 2002, were designed to ensure that criminals could not benefit financially from their illegal activities, even after serving prison sentences. The financial investigation required to support these proceedings was extensive and complex. Forensic accountants examined years of financial records, tracking money flows, and identifying assets that could be linked to Hussein's criminal activities. This type of investigation requires specialized expertise and can take many months to complete comprehensively. The December 2017 confiscation order requiring Hussein to repay £295,000 within 3 months represented a significant victory for law enforcement agencies committed to ensuring that crime does not pay. However, the practical challenges of enforcing such orders often prove as complex as obtaining them in the first place. Hussein's response to the confiscation order would ultimately determine whether he would serve additional time in prison beyond his original 12-year sentence. The 3-month deadline was deliberately tight, designed to prevent criminals from hiding or transferring assets while confiscation proceedings were ongoing. The additional £33,000 of criminal benefit that remained outstanding pending identification of further assets highlighted the ongoing nature of proceeds of crime investigations. Even after successful prosecutions and confiscation orders, law enforcement agencies often continue monitoring convicted criminals for evidence of hidden assets that might be recovered. Hussein's case established important precedents for future drug trafficking prosecutions, particularly regarding the integration of airport security intelligence with broader criminal investigations. The methods used to connect his airport arrest with the discovery of his criminal enterprise became a template for similar investigations. The case also demonstrated the importance of comprehensive search and seizure operations following drug-related arrests. The decision to search Hussein's home address thoroughly, rather than focusing only on the airport offense, revealed the full scope of his criminal activities and ensured that the sentence reflected his actual level of criminal culpability. For Birmingham Airport security services, Hussein's case provided valuable lessons about the importance of treating apparently minor drug discoveries as potential indicators of much larger criminal operations. The training and procedures that were developed following his case helped airport staff recognize similar patterns in future investigations. The intelligence value of Hussein's case extended far beyond his individual prosecution. Information gathered during the investigation was shared with law enforcement agencies across the United Kingdom and internationally, contributing to broader understanding of how middle-tier drug dealers operate and how they can be most effectively targeted. Analysis of Hussein's supplier relationships provided insights into heroin trafficking routes from Afghanistan through Pakistan to the United Kingdom, information that proved valuable for disrupting other criminal networks operating along similar pathways. The case also contributed to academic and policy discussions about drug trafficking enforcement strategies. Hussein's combination of operational sophistication and catastrophic operational security failures provided researchers with valuable data about criminal decision-making under pressure and the psychological factors that can undermine even successful criminal enterprises. However, perhaps the most important legacy of Hussein's case was its demonstration of how individual criminal mistakes can expose broader networks of criminal activity. The heroin rap that led to his airport arrest was worth perhaps £300 on the street, This multiplication effect where small investigative successes lead to much larger discoveries represents one of the most effective approaches to combating organized crime. Hussein's case showed that even the most sophisticated criminals remain vulnerable to basic operational errors, and that law enforcement agencies equipped with appropriate legal powers and investigative techniques can exploit these vulnerabilities to achieve disproportionate impacts on criminal networks. The third major case in our investigation takes us forward to November 2021, introducing us to a different type of criminal operator whose approach to drug smuggling would challenge assumptions about how modern trafficking networks recruit and manage their couriers. Mohammad Uzair Rashid's case reveals the evolution of international drug trafficking in the 5 years since Hussein's arrest, showing how criminal networks had adapted their methods, while law enforcement agencies had simultaneously improved their detection capabilities. Rashid, a 35-year-old from Oldham in Greater Manchester, represented a new generation of drug couriers who combined traditional smuggling methods with more sophisticated operational security measures. Unlike Hussein's catastrophic operational failure, Rashid's arrest resulted from the gradual accumulation of intelligence that allowed investigators to identify and monitor his activities over an extended period. Oldham provides important context for understanding how Rashid became involved in international drug trafficking. The town has experienced significant economic challenges over the past 3 decades, with traditional textile industries declining and unemployment rates remaining persistently high in certain communities. Like Bradford and Birmingham, Oldham has substantial Pakistani and Bangladeshi communities that maintain strong cultural and economic connections to South Asia. While these connections are overwhelmingly legitimate and beneficial, they also create opportunities for criminal networks seeking to establish international trafficking routes. Rashid appears to have been recruited into drug trafficking through connections within Oldham's Pakistani community, possibly during a period when he was experiencing financial difficulties. Intelligence reports suggest that his recruitment followed a pattern common among international drug couriers: initial contact through cultural or religious networks, gradual introduction to criminal associates, and eventual recruitment for specific smuggling operations. The recruitment process for international drug couriers typically involves careful vetting to identify individuals who can travel internationally without attracting suspicion, who have legitimate reasons for visiting source countries, and who can maintain composure under pressure. Rashid's profile matched these requirements perfectly. He was a British citizen with Pakistani heritage. He had legitimate family connections in Pakistan that justified regular travel, and he had no previous criminal convictions that might attract airport security attention. However, what distinguished Rashid from many other drug couriers was his apparent understanding of the risks involved and his attempts to develop operational security measures that might protect him from detection. Rather than simply following instructions from criminal handlers, he appears to have educated himself about airport security procedures and law enforcement techniques. This self-education was evident in several aspects of his smuggling methodology. His choice of routing traveling from Pakistan via Dubai rather than on direct flights was designed to reduce the likelihood of enhanced security screening. Dubai International Airport handles enormous volumes of passenger traffic from South Asia, creating natural cover for individuals traveling from drug-producing regions. The Dubai stopover also served another important purpose. It provided opportunities for Rashid to assess whether he was under surveillance and to make final preparations for the most dangerous part of his journey. Intelligence reports suggest that he used the Dubai transit period to communicate with his handlers and receive final instructions about how to behave during UK immigration and customs procedures. Rashid's preparation extended to his personal appearance and behavior during travel. CCTV footage from various airports shows someone who had clearly thought carefully about how to present himself as an ordinary passenger. His clothing was appropriate for business travel. His behavior was calm and confident, and he carried documentation that supported his cover story about the purposes of his trip. The sophistication of his approach was further demonstrated by his communication security measures. Rather than using his primary mobile phone for criminal communications, he had acquired additional devices specifically for coordinating with his handlers. These phones were configured with encrypted messaging applications and were used only for criminal communications, reducing the risk that routine law enforcement monitoring might expose his activities. His handlers in Pakistan demonstrated similar levels of operational sophistication. The individual referred to as brother in intercepted communications was clearly experienced in managing international drug couriers, providing guidance that balanced the need for security with practical requirements for successful smuggling operations. The reassurance provided to Rashid as he approached UK border controls remained God will be generous, was carefully calculated to maintain his composure during the most dangerous phase of the operation. This type of psychological management is crucial for successful courier operations, as nervous or agitated behavior can trigger additional security screening. However, the same communication that was intended to reassure Rashid also provided law enforcement agencies with crucial intelligence about the criminal network, as structure and methodology. The intercept of these messages, combined with other intelligence sources, allowed investigators to build a comprehensive picture of how the smuggling operation functioned. The heroin that Rashid was carrying represented a significant criminal investment by his handlers. Nearly 18 kilograms of high-purity heroin, with a street value exceeding £900,000, indicated that this was not a speculative smuggling attempt, but part of a well-established trafficking pipeline between Pakistan and the United Kingdom. The exceptional purity of the heroin between 66% and 71%, provided important intelligence about Rashid's supply chain connections. Heroin of this quality typically comes from sources very close to the original production areas in Afghanistan, suggesting that his handlers had direct relationships with processors operating near the Afghan border. This level of supply chain access requires substantial criminal credentials and significant financial resources. The criminal network that recruited Rashid was clearly operating at a much higher level than typical street-level drug dealing operations, with international connections that spanned multiple countries and sophisticated logistics capabilities. The decision to use Rashid as a courier for such a valuable shipment also indicated the confidence that his handlers had in his abilities, and their assessment of the risks involved. Entrusting nearly £1 million worth of heroin to a single courier represents a significant criminal investment that would only be made if the network believed the probability of success was very high. However, this confidence may have been misplaced. While Rashid's operational security measures were more sophisticated than those employed by many other drug couriers, law enforcement agencies had simultaneously been improving their detection capabilities and intelligence gathering techniques. The investigation that led to Rashid's arrest had been developing for several weeks before his November 2021 trip to Pakistan. Intelligence agencies had identified him as a person of interest through a combination of travel pattern analysis, financial intelligence, and human source reporting. Travel pattern analysis involves examining flight booking data, immigration records, and other travel-related information to identify individuals whose movements might indicate involvement in criminal activities. Rashid's pattern of regular trips to Pakistan, combined with other risk factors, had brought him to the attention of Border Force intelligence analysts. Financial intelligence had revealed transactions that were inconsistent with Rashid's declared income and employment status. Large cash deposits, unusual money transfer patterns, and unexplained expenditure had all contributed to building a profile that suggested possible involvement in criminal activities. Human source reporting intelligence, provided by individuals within criminal networks or communities where criminal activities occur, had provided additional information that connected Rashid to suspected drug trafficking activities. This type of intelligence is often fragmentary and requires careful analysis to separate reliable information from speculation or misinformation. The decision to arrest Rashid upon his return to Birmingham Airport was based on a combination of these intelligence sources and real-time assessment of the risks involved in allowing him to continue his journey. Border Force officers had to balance the need to gather evidence against the risk that allowing him to proceed might result in nearly 80 kilograms of heroin reaching British streets. The arrest operation itself was conducted with the same precision that had characterized the investigation of Cowzer's family network. Rather than attempting a high-profile intervention that might attract media attention or compromise other ongoing investigations, officers directed Rashid to a routine secondary search area where more detailed examination of his luggage could be conducted. The discovery of the heroin packages during this secondary search immediately escalated the situation from routine border control to major drug trafficking investigation. The quantity and purity of the drugs required immediate notification of National Crime Agency teams and activation of protocols for handling major seizures. Rashid's initial response to the discovery of heroin in his luggage revealed both his preparation for this possibility and the limitations of his operational security measures. His immediate denial of ownership was consistent with advice that drug couriers typically receive from their handlers, but his inability to provide convincing alternative explanations exposed the weaknesses in his cover story. The forensic examination of Rashid's mobile devices provided the most damaging evidence against him. Despite his attempts to maintain communication security, investigators were able to recover deleted messages and reconstruct conversations with his Pakistani handlers that clearly demonstrated his knowing participation in the drug smuggling conspiracy. The WhatsApp messages exchanged during his journey provided a real-time record of how the criminal network managed his movements and attempted to maintain operational security. These communications would prove crucial during his eventual prosecution, as they demonstrated both his awareness of what he was doing and the international nature of the criminal conspiracy. The message traffic also provided valuable intelligence about the broader criminal network, revealing communication patterns, operational procedures, and security measures that could inform future investigations. This type of intelligence is often more valuable than individual prosecutions, as it enables law enforcement agencies to understand and disrupt entire criminal enterprises rather than simply arresting individual operatives. Rashid's case highlighted the continuing evolution of drug trafficking methods and the ongoing challenges faced by law enforcement agencies attempting to combat international criminal networks. While his operational security measures were more sophisticated than those used by earlier generations of drug couriers, they were ultimately insufficient to protect him from detection by law enforcement agencies that had simultaneously been improving their capabilities. The case also demonstrated the importance of international cooperation in combating drug trafficking. Intelligence gathered during Rashid's investigation was shared with law enforcement agencies in Pakistan, Dubai, and other countries where the criminal network appeared to operate, contributing to broader efforts to disrupt heroin trafficking routes from Afghanistan to Europe. However, perhaps the most significant aspect of Rashid's case was what it revealed about the human costs of drug trafficking networks, like Cowzer's children and Hussein before him. Rashid had made decisions that would destroy his own future while contributing to the broader epidemic of drug addiction and related crime affecting communities across Britain. His 9-year prison sentence, handed down at Birmingham Crown Court in May 2022, reflected both the seriousness of his individual crimes and the need to deter others who might be considering similar criminal activities. However, it also represented a personal man whose life had been derailed by involvement in criminal activities that offered short-term financial rewards, but inevitable long-term consequences. The intelligence gathered from Rashid's case continued to generate investigative leads long after his conviction. Financial analysis revealed money transfer patterns that implicated other individuals in the criminal network, while communication intercepts provided insights into how similar smuggling operations were organized and managed. For Birmingham Airport authorities, Rashid's case provided additional evidence of the airport's continuing attractiveness to international drug trafficking networks. The sophistication of his approach and the value of the drugs he was carrying indicated that criminal organizations viewed Birmingham as a viable entry point for large-scale smuggling operations. This assessment led to further investments in airport security technology and intelligence capabilities, as authorities recognized that the threat from international drug trafficking was likely to continue evolving in response to law enforcement countermeasures. The broader implications of Rashid's case extended beyond drug trafficking enforcement to questions about community resilience and the factors that make individuals vulnerable to criminal recruitment. His background in Oldham, his financial circumstances, and his cultural connections all contributed to creating opportunities that criminal networks were able to exploit. Understanding these vulnerability factors is crucial for developing prevention strategies that address the root causes of criminal recruitment rather than simply responding to criminal activities after they occur. Rashid's case provided valuable data for researchers and policymakers working to understand how communities can better protect themselves from criminal exploitation. As we return to conclude the story of Farzana Cowzer's family network, Rashid's case serves as an important reminder that the drug trafficking problems exposed at Birmingham Airport represent ongoing challenges that require sustained attention from law enforcement agencies, airport authorities, and the broader community. The sophisticated methods employed by all three criminal operations we have examined demonstrate that drug trafficking networks are constantly evolving their approaches in response to law enforcement countermeasures. While individual cases may be successfully prosecuted, the broader criminal ecosystem continues to adapt and develop new vulnerabilities to exploit. The sentencing of Farzana Cowzer's criminal network at Birmingham Crown Court in late 2024 marked the conclusion of one of the most significant family-based drug trafficking cases in recent British legal history. However, the sentences handed down by the court represented more than just punishment for individual crimes. Questions about criminal responsibility, family loyalty, and the devastating impact that organized crime can have on multiple generations. When Judge Harrison delivered the sentences, the courtroom was packed with family members, community representatives, and law enforcement officials who had followed the case throughout the investigation and trial. The judge's remarks provided a comprehensive assessment not just of the individual crimes involved, but of the broader social and criminal justice implications of the conspiracy. Farzana Cowzer, as the acknowledged leader of the criminal network, received the heaviest sentence, 13 years and 4 months in prison. Judge Harrison's sentencing remarks specifically addressed her role in recruiting family members, noting that her position as a mother and grandmother made her criminal leadership particularly reprehensible. The judge observed that Cowzer had systematically corrupted her own children, transforming what should have been a source of guidance and protection into a mechanism for criminal exploitation. Her willingness to sacrifice her children's futures for criminal profits represented, in the judge's words, a profound betrayal of the most fundamental parental responsibilities. The sentence reflected not just the scale of the drug trafficking operation, but also the aggravating factors associated with Cowzer's abusive family relationships and her role in corrupting young people who might otherwise have avoided criminal involvement. June Shefakis, sentence of 10 years and 9 months, acknowledged both his central role in the conspiracy and the complex factors that had led to his criminal involvement. At 33 years old, he was legally an adult, fully responsible for his actions. Yet the judge recognized the psychological pressures and family dynamics that had contributed to his criminal recruitment. The sentencing remarks noted that June had been raised in an environment where criminal activity was gradually normalized, making his path toward serious criminal involvement almost inevitable. However, the judge was clear that these mitigating factors could not excuse his knowing participation in activities that caused substantial harm to British communities. Mohammed Amir Shafak's 8 years and 9 months sentence reflected similar considerations. His role as a courier required him to make multiple international trips, interact directly with criminal contacts in other countries, and handle substantial quantities of cocaine. The judge noted that his criminal involvement had been extensive and knowing, requiring a sentence that reflected both deterrence and punishment. However, the judge also acknowledged that Mohammed Amir had been recruited into criminal activity by family members during a period when he was still developing adult decision-making capabilities. The sentence attempted to balance recognition of this exploitation with the need to hold him accountable for his criminal choices. Mohammed's sentence of 8 years and 1 month was perhaps the most tragic of all the adult sentences. At just 22 years old, when arrested, he represented the devastating impact that family-based criminal networks can have on young people who have barely begun their adult lives. The judge's remarks noted that Mohammed had been robbed of the opportunity to develop legitimate adult relationships and career aspirations by his recruitment into the family's criminal activities. His sentence reflected both punishment for his criminal involvement and recognition that he was, in many ways, a victim of the same criminal network that had exploited him. The case of Hamza Shafak presented the court with particularly complex legal and ethical challenges. His involvement in the conspiracy had begun when he was just 17 years old, making him legally a child at the time of the offenses. However, by the time of sentencing, he had turned 18 and was therefore subject to adult criminal justice procedures. The decision to defer his sentencing until October 2025 reflected the court's recognition that his case required careful consideration of factors that did not apply to his adult family members. The judge needed to balance accountability for his criminal actions with recognition of his vulnerability as a minor who had been exploited by trusted family members. Youth sentencing guidelines require courts to prioritize rehabilitation over punishment when dealing with offenders who are minors at the time of their crimes. However, the seriousness of international drug trafficking offenses creates tensions between these rehabilitative goals and the need to reflect the gravity of the crimes involved. The eventual sentence for Hamza Shafak would likely reflect extensive pre-sentence reports, examining his personal circumstances, his understanding of the criminal activities he had participated in, and his prospects for successful rehabilitation. These reports would be crucial for determining whether a custodial sentence was appropriate or whether community-based interventions might be more effective. Safaino's sentence of 7 years and 2 months acknowledged her youth. She was just 19 at the time of the offenses, recognizing her knowing participation in the criminal conspiracy. The judge noted that her recruitment by her own mother represented a particular form of exploitation that had derailed her transition to independent adult life. The sentence reflected the court's assessment that Safana had been both a perpetrator and a victim of the criminal network, requiring punishment for her criminal involvement, while acknowledging the family pressures that had led to her participation. Sada Hussein's 2-year suspended sentence represented the court's recognition of her more peripheral role in the conspiracy and the particular pressures she faced as a daughter-in-law within the criminal family structure. The suspended sentence meant that she would not serve immediate custody time unless she committed further offenses during the suspension period. This sentence reflected the court's assessment that Hussein had been drawn into criminal activity through family relationships rather than personal criminal motivation, and that her involvement had been less extensive than other family members. However, the suspended sentence also served as a warning that any future criminal involvement would result in immediate imprisonment. This type of sentence is designed to provide opportunities for rehabilitation while maintaining the threat of custody as a deterrent to future criminal activity. Khalid Abdul Kawai's sentence of 10 years and 9 months reflected his status as the only non-family member in the conspiracy. The judge noted that his decision to join the criminal network had been purely motivated by financial gain, without the complex family dynamics that had influenced the other defendants. The sentence acknowledged that Kawai had made a calculated decision to participate in serious criminal activity and had done so with full understanding of the risks and consequences involved. His criminal involvement had been extensive and knowing, requiring a sentence that reflected both deterrence and punishment. The total sentences handed down in the Cowzer case, over 60 years of imprisonment, combined represented one of the most significant criminal justice responses to family-based drug trafficking in recent British legal history. However, the sentences also highlighted broader questions about how the criminal justice system should respond to criminal networks that exploit family relationships and target vulnerable young people for recruitment. Legal experts following the case noted that the sentences established important precedents for future prosecutions involving family-based criminal networks. The court's recognition of the particular harm caused by criminal exploitation of family relationships could influence sentencing in similar cases across the United Kingdom. The case also contributed to ongoing policy discussions about how to prevent criminal recruitment of young people within families where criminal activity has become normalized. Traditional crime prevention strategies focus on community-based interventions, but cases like Cowzer's demonstrate the challenges of protecting young people when the criminal threats come from within their own families. Child protection agencies examining the case identified several opportunities where earlier intervention might have prevented the recruitment of the youngest family members into criminal activity. These included educational programs that help young people recognize criminal exploitation, support services for families at risk of criminal involvement, and legal mechanisms for protecting minors from criminal recruitment by family members. However, implementing such interventions requires overcoming significant practical and cultural challenges. Criminal families often maintain facades of respectability that make them difficult to identify through conventional safeguarding procedures. Additionally, young people may be reluctant to report criminal activity within their families due to loyalty, fear, or lack of understanding about the seriousness of what is happening. The financial investigation that accompanied the criminal prosecutions revealed the enormous profits that had been generated by the Cowzer Network's activities. Preliminary estimates suggested that the family had benefited by several £1 million over the course of their criminal operations, money that had been used to purchase property, vehicles, and other assets that enhanced their apparent respectability. Proceeds of crime proceedings were initiated against all convicted family members, designed to recover criminal profits and ensure that the family could not benefit financially from their criminal activities. However, These proceedings faced significant challenges in identifying and valuing assets that had been purchased with criminal money and subsequently integrated into the family-esque legitimate financial activities. The complexity of tracing criminal assets within family networks reflects broader challenges in enforcing financial penalties against organized crime groups. Criminal profits are often distributed among multiple family members, invested in legitimate businesses, or transferred to overseas accounts that are difficult for UK authorities to access. Nevertheless, the financial investigation provided valuable intelligence about how criminal networks launder money and integrate criminal profits into legitimate economic activities. This intelligence informed broader law enforcement strategies for combating organized crime and helped identify vulnerabilities in financial systems that criminal networks exploit. The international implications of the Cowzer case extended far beyond the individual prosecutions. Intelligence gathered during the investigation was shared with law enforcement agencies in Pakistan, Mexico, and other countries where the network had operated, contributing to broader efforts to disrupt international drug trafficking routes. The sophistication of the network's international connections revealed how modern drug trafficking operates as a truly global enterprise, requiring coordination across multiple countries and involving criminal organizations with different specializations and capabilities. Mexican authorities used intelligence from the Cowzer investigation to identify and arrest several individuals who had been involved in loading cocaine onto flights destined for Birmingham Airport. These arrests disrupted what appeared to be a broader criminal network that was supplying multiple trafficking operations, targeting UK destinations. Pakistani authorities similarly used the intelligence to investigate criminal networks operating along traditional heroin trafficking routes from Afghanistan. While these investigations were complicated by the complex security situation in border regions, they provided valuable insights into how international trafficking networks maintain their supply chains. The case also contributed to broader academic and policy research about family-based criminal networks and their impact on communities. Researchers examining the case identified several factors that had enabled the network to operate successfully for several years while maintaining facades of respectability. These factors included the use of legitimate cultural and religious networks to mask criminal communications, the exploitation of established international travel patterns to avoid suspicion, and the systematic grooming of young family members to normalize criminal activity. Understanding these factors is crucial for developing more effective prevention and detection strategies that can identify and disrupt family-based criminal networks before they cause extensive harm to both their own members and the broader community. The long-term impact of the Cowzer case on the Bradford community, where the family lived, reflects broader questions about how criminal networks affect the social fabric of the areas where they operate. While the family had maintained appearances of respectability, their arrest and prosecution revealed that serious criminal activity had been occurring within what appeared to be an ordinary suburban neighborhood. Community leaders examining the aftermath of the case identified several lessons about the importance of community vigilance and the need for better communication between residents and law enforcement agencies. However, they also recognized the challenges of identifying criminal activity within families that are skilled at maintaining facades of legitimacy. The case highlighted the importance of community-based crime prevention programs that help residents recognize and report suspicious activity, while also addressing the underlying social and economic factors that make some individuals vulnerable to criminal recruitment. For law enforcement agencies, the Cowzer case provided valuable lessons about the investigation and prosecution of family-based criminal networks. The success of the investigation reflected careful intelligence gathering, international cooperation, and patient surveillance that allowed investigators to understand the full scope of the criminal conspiracy before making arrests. However, the case also revealed the enormous resources required to investigate and prosecute complex international criminal networks. The investigation involved multiple agencies, required sophisticated surveillance techniques, and demanded extensive international cooperation over many months. These resource requirements raise important questions about law enforcement priorities and the allocation of investigative resources. While cases like Cowzer's demonstrate the importance of disrupting sophisticated criminal networks, they also consume resources that might otherwise be used to address other criminal activities affecting local communities. The balance between targeting high-level criminal networks and maintaining effective responses to volume crime represents an ongoing challenge for law enforcement agencies operating with finite resources and competing demands for their attention. As our investigation concludes, the cases of Farzana Cowzer's family network, Majid Hussein's criminal empire, and Mohammed Azhar Rashid's courier operation provide a comprehensive picture of how modern drug trafficking operates and evolves in response to law enforcement countermeasures. Each case reveals different aspects of the same broader phenomena: the systematic exploitation of Britain's international connectivity and cultural diversity by criminal networks seeking to profit from the illegal drug trade. Together, they demonstrate both the sophistication of modern criminal operations and the dedication of law enforcement agencies working to combat them. However, they also reveal the human costs of these criminal activities, not just for the communities affected by drug addiction and related crime, but for the individuals whose lives are destroyed by involvement in criminal networks that promise wealth but deliver only destruction. The young people recruited into these criminal operations: Hamza Shafaq at 17, Sofana at 19, Ume Mohammed at 20, to represent perhaps the most tragic aspect of these cases: their involvement in serious criminal activity during the years when they should have been developing adult relationships and career aspirations, illustrates the devastating long-term impact of criminal exploitation. Understanding how to prevent such exploitation, how to identify it when it occurs, and how to respond effectively when it is discovered represents one of the most significant challenges facing modern criminal justice systems. The cases also demonstrate the international nature of modern drug trafficking and the challenges this creates for national law enforcement agencies. Criminal networks that operate across multiple countries can exploit differences in legal systems, enforcement capabilities, and international cooperation to maintain their operations even when individual elements are disrupted. Effective responses to such networks require sustained international cooperation, sophisticated intelligence sharing, and coordinated enforcement actions that can disrupt criminal operations simultaneously across multiple jurisdictions. Birmingham Airport's role as a preferred entry point for multiple criminal networks reflects both its strategic importance as an international travel hub and the challenges facing airport authorities seeking to balance security requirements with the need to facilitate legitimate travel and trade. The airport's experience with these cases has led to significant investments in security technology, intelligence capabilities, and staff training designed to identify and disrupt criminal activities while minimizing impacts on legitimate passengers. However, the continuing evolution of criminal methods means that these security measures must be constantly updated and refined in response to new threats and changing criminal techniques. The broader implications of our investigation extend beyond drug trafficking to questions about how modern societies can protect themselves from organized crime while maintaining the openness and connectivity that characterize contemporary life. The criminal networks we have examined exploited legitimate systems, international travel, family relationships, cultural connections that are essential elements of modern multicultural societies. Finding ways to protect these systems from criminal exploitation while preserving their legitimate functions represents one of the defining challenges of contemporary law enforcement. The success of the investigations we have examined provides hope that law enforcement agencies are adapting effectively to these challenges, developing new capabilities and techniques that can identify and disrupt even sophisticated criminal operations. However, the continuing emergence of new criminal networks using evolved methods demonstrates that this will be an ongoing struggle requiring sustained attention, resources, and innovation from law enforcement agencies and their partners. As Birmingham Airport continues to serve millions of legitimate passengers each year while simultaneously serving as a gateway for law enforcement agencies working to protect British communities from international criminal networks, it represents both the opportunities and challenges of our interconnected world. The cases we have examined remind us that behind every successful criminal investigation are dedicated professionals working to protect communities from the devastating impact of organized crime, and that their success depends not just on their own efforts, but on the support and vigilance of the communities they serve. The story of Birmingham Airport's hidden gateway to Britain's drug trade continues to evolve, with new cases emerging regularly as criminal networks adapt their methods and law enforcement agencies respond with improved detection and prevention capabilities. However, The fundamental lessons from the cases we have examined remain constant: that criminal networks, regardless of their sophistication, remain vulnerable to patient investigation and international cooperation, and that their ultimate defeat depends on the determination of law enforcement agencies and communities, working together to protect the values and institutions that define our society. The three major criminal operations we have examined represent just a fraction of the broader struggle between organized crime and law enforcement that plays out daily at airports, borders, and communities across the United Kingdom and around the world. But they also demonstrate that this struggle can be won, that even the most sophisticated criminal networks can be identified and dismantled, and that the dedication of law enforcement professionals and the resilience of communities can ultimately triumph over those who would exploit our freedoms for criminal profit. The hidden gateway may have been exposed, but the vigilance required to keep it closed will be an ongoing responsibility for all of us who value the safety and security of our communities. Our investigation into Birmingham Airport, ESRO, as a crucial hub in international drug trafficking operations, reveals the complex challenges facing modern law enforcement agencies as they work to combat criminal networks that exploit the very connectivity and openness that characterize contemporary society. The cases of Farzana Cowzer's multi-generational crime family, Majid Hussein's sophisticated drug empire, and Mohammed Azhar Rashid's international courier operation demonstrate both the evolution of criminal methods and the persistent dedication of law enforcement professionals working to protect British communities from the devastating impact of organized crime. As these stories conclude, they leave us with important questions about how societies can maintain their openness to legitimate international travel, trade, and cultural exchange, while protecting themselves from criminal exploitation of these same systems. The ongoing battle between criminal networks and law enforcement agencies will continue to evolve, with new technologies, methods, and challenges emerging regularly. However, the fundamental principles revealed by our investigation, the importance of international cooperation, the value of patient intelligence gathering, and the need for community support will remain constant. Birmingham Airport will continue to serve as both a gateway for legitimate travelers and a potential entry point for criminal networks seeking to exploit Britain's position as a major international hub. The success of efforts to prevent such exploitation will depend on the continued vigilance and dedication of all those involved in protecting our borders and communities. The human costs of these criminal operations to destroyed lives, damaged communities, and corrupted families reminds us why this work is so important and why it deserves our continued support and attention. As new criminal networks emerge and existing ones adapt their methods, the lessons learned from these cases will continue to inform law enforcement strategies and community protection efforts across the United Kingdom and internationally. The story of Britain's hidden gateway to international drug trafficking is far from over, but the success of the investigations we have examined provides hope that law enforcement agencies are equipped with the tools, techniques, and determination necessary to meet whatever challenges the future may bring. The ultimate victory in this ongoing struggle will belong not just to law enforcement agencies, but to the communities and institutions that refuse to allow criminal networks to exploit the freedoms and opportunities that define our democratic society. In the end, the story of Birmingham Airport's criminal networks is also the story of their defeat, a reminder that no criminal operation, regardless of its sophistication or resources, can ultimately prevail against the combined determination of law enforcement agencies and communities committed to protecting the values and institutions that make our society worth defending.